What if I told you the loudest voice sabotaging your future isn't from your haters, your boss, or your past, it's coming from your own head? And until you kill that voice, you'll keep burying every break through God is trying to birth in your life. Your thoughts are the silent architects of your life. Before anything shows up in your reality, it first forms in your mentality. Every relationship, every decision, every financial situation, every opportunity or setback you've ever experienced at some level was shaped by a thought you agreed with. You cannot live a life that is inconsistent with the thoughts you continually think. The truth is, your life is not just happening to you. It's being built by you, one thought at a time. A man doesn't become successful when he gets the money. He becomes successful when he changes the way he thinks about money, time, relationships, and himself. A woman doesn't step into her greatness when someone else finally validates her. She steps into it when she makes the internal shift that says, I am enough. I don't need permission to be powerful. That internal shift always precedes external elevation. That's why the enemy isn't after your money, your job, or your connections. He's after your mind, because if he can hijack your thoughts, he can reroute your entire life. You've got to stop treating your thoughts like harmless visitors and start treating them like architects with blueprints in their hands. Because every time you agree with a thought, you're handing it permission to build something in your life. If that thought is rooted in truth, it will build peace, strategy, and power. But if that thought is rooted in fear, scarcity, or shame, it will build walls, dysfunction, and cycles that repeat for years. Thoughts are not passive, they're productive. Every thought is carrying the DNA of a future reality. That's why Scripture tells us to take every thought captive. Not some thoughts, not most thoughts. Every thought, because the thought you don't take captive will eventually take you captive. Your mind is like a construction site, and your thoughts are the workers. If you let in lazy workers, they'll build weak structures. If you let in rebellious workers, they'll sabotage the whole project. But if you choose workers who are trained in truth, integrity, courage, and clarity, they will build a life that can carry your calling. So let me ask you, what kind of workers have you been hiring? What kind of blueprints are your thoughts following? Because if the foundation of your thinking is insecurity, every decision you make will be filtered through the fear of rejection. If the blueprint of your thought life is scarcity, you'll say no to abundance even when it shows up at your door. If your mental pattern is I'm not good enough, then no opportunity will ever feel safe enough for you to seize. The battlefield isn't your job. It's not your spouse. It's not your past. The real war is happening in your mind, and if you don't win it there, you won't win it anywhere. People are trying to change their lives without changing their thoughts, and that's like trying to build a mansion on sand. It will collapse every time. That's why transformation doesn't begin with strategy. It begins with mentality. You don't need a new opportunity until you've built the mindset to handle the ones you already have. You don't need a platform until you've built the mental structure to stand on it, because elevation without mental renovation is a setup for collapse. You've got to ask yourself, what thoughts have I been building with? What beliefs have I been rehearsing? What assumptions have I made my identity? Because if you trace the pattern, you'll find the blueprint. And once you identify the blueprint, you can change it. Changing your thoughts doesn't mean you lie to yourself. It means you align with truth. You don't fake confidence. You agree with your God. Give an identity. You don't ignore reality. You speak to it with authority. You don't drown in doubt. You replace it with declaration. Every successful person you admire has built their life from a blueprint that you can access to. The difference is, they did the mental work. They built resilience when no one was clapping. They trained their thoughts when fear was screaming. They design their future by mastering their present mindset. So don't underestimate the power of what's happening between your ears, because your thoughts are not just words in your head. They are the foundation of your life. Your future is being drafted in the blueprint of your mind right now, and if you don't like what's being built, change the architect. You can't live like a champion while thinking like a victim. You can't lead like a king while thinking like a slave. Your hands will never build what your mind doesn't first believe. That's why you've got to treat your thoughts like your future depends on them. Because it does. Every negative thought you entertain is not just a fleeting feeling. It's a seed. And seeds, when left unchecked, don't just sit idle. They grow, they mature, they multiply. That means every time you allow a negative thought to take root in your mind, you are sowing the beginning stages of your own destruction. Self-sabotage doesn't start with an action. It starts with a whisper, a thought, a quiet, convincing lie that seems too small to be dangerous. But left unattended, that thought becomes a system, a stronghold, a mindset that will quietly burn down everything you're trying to build. Negative thinking isn't just pessimism, it's prophecy. When you say, "I'll never get out of this," you've just given your situation a command. When you think, "They always leave," you're already pushing people away before they even arrive. You speak failure, and then you're surprised when it answers, but it only answered because you called it. That's the trap of self-sabotage. You speak death, and then mourn the burial of the very thing you were called to birth. You have to understand that your thoughts are not isolated. They are not without consequence. What you think consistently, you eventually believe, and what you believe becomes the foundation of every choice you make. That's how powerful negative thoughts are. One small "I can't" becomes a lifetime of missed opportunities. One quiet "I'm not worthy" becomes a lifestyle of settling. It doesn't scream at you, it seeps in, slowly, subtly, systematically, until one day you're looking around at a life that was never supposed to be yours, wondering how you got there. You didn't fall off a cliff. You took small mental steps away from your destiny. You see, negative thinking doesn't look dangerous at first. In fact, it often disguises itself as realism. It says, "I'm just being honest," when really it's rehearsing defeat. It says, "I don't want to get my hopes up," when what it really means is, "I'm protecting myself from disappointment by rejecting possibility." But here's the truth. You can't be realistic and revolutionary at the same time. You can't live a supernatural life with natural thinking. You can't partner with heaven while agreeing with hell in your head. Every negative thought is an invitation to agree with limitation. And when you agree, you partner. When you partner, you produce. So if you've been producing frustration, cycles, stagnation, or missed opportunities, the root isn't just behavior, it's belief. You don't need more hustle. You need mental healing. You don't need another course. You need to confront the curse of how you've been thinking about yourself, your future, and your God. Self-sabotage shows up in subtle ways. You procrastinate not because you're lazy, but because you don't believe you're capable. You pick broken relationships because you don't believe you deserve healthy ones. You pass up good opportunities because you're afraid to outgrow the version of you that everyone's comfortable with. But at the core of all those decisions is a negative thought, a seed that you didn't kill. What's dangerous is that those seeds often grow best in silence. You don't talk about them, you don't confront them, you just live with them, and as they grow, they become the lens through which you view everything. You start to expect disappointment, you anticipate rejection, you prepare for failure, not because it's truth, but because it's familiar. You've rehearsed it for so long that dysfunction feels safer than freedom. And so you sabotage your own success, not because you want to fail, but because somewhere along the way you believed you didn't deserve to win. But let me tell you this, the moment you recognize a negative thought for what it is, a seed of self-sabotage, you have the authority to uproot it. You are not a victim of your mind. You are the steward of it. You get to decide what grows. You get to choose what gets watered. You get to reject the lies and replace them with truth. You don't have to be perfect. You just have to be intentional. Because whatever you don't intentionally uproot will unintentionally ruin you. This is why you must become violent with anything in your mind that opposes your purpose. You don't pet negative thoughts. You don't reason with them. You don't explain them away. You kill them. Because if you don't, they will kill your momentum, your confidence, your clarity, your peace, and eventually, your calling. It's time to start thinking like the person you were created to be, not the person fear raised you to become. That means you stop letting thoughts that are beneath your destiny live rent free in your mind. That means you speak life even when death feels more familiar. That means you build a mental environment where purpose can flourish and self-sabotage can no longer survive, because your future can't afford for you to keep watering seeds of defeat. You can't live a prosperous life with a poverty mindset, because no matter what's in your hand, what dominates your mind will always win. The mindset of poverty doesn't begin with your bank account. It begins with your belief. And it's entirely possible to have money, opportunities, and resources, but still live like you're broke in your soul. Prosperity is not about what you possess. It's about what you believe you deserve. It's about how you see yourself, your value, and your future. Until your mind shifts, your life will stay locked. The poverty mindset says, I never have enough. It trains you to hoard, to hustle in fear, and to expect lack as your default setting. Even when you get more, you'll waste it or shrink it because your inner world isn't equipped to steward abundance. You'll sabotage blessings because you don't believe they belong to you. You'll shrink from opportunities because you fear being exposed as inadequate. You'll undercharge your value, stay in survival mode relationships, and ignore divine doors because you're still thinking like a slave when you were called to rule. This mindset doesn't just affect money. It impacts relationships, decisions, creativity, and your spiritual life. A poverty mindset will make you jealous of others instead of inspired by them. It will make you compete with people you were supposed to collaborate with. It will make you compare your journey instead of celebrating your lane. When you operate in lack mentally, everything feels like a threat. Someone else's win feels like your loss. Someone else's blessing feels like your curse. But the kingdom doesn't work like that. God doesn't run out. If he did it for them, it's proof he can do it for you. But the poverty mindset will blind you to that truth and keep you bitter instead of blessed. Most people think poverty is just about being broke, but it's deeper than that. Poverty is a spirit. It's a way of thinking that attaches itself to your identity. It tells you that you are what you lack. It convinces you that you can't rise because of what you didn't have growing up. It wraps shame around your potential and makes you afraid of expansion. And if you don't confront it, you'll wear it like a cloak. You'll pass it down, you'll justify it, you'll spiritualize it, you'll even teach it to your children by calling it humility. But real humility isn't thinking less of yourself, it's thinking rightly of yourself. And if God calls you royalty, why are you living like a beggar? If he gave you dominion, why are you renting your mind out to fear? If he placed greatness in you, Why are you shrinking every time pressure shows up? It's not your external that's blocking you. It's your internal. Until you shift your mindset, your miracles will stay trapped in the realm of potential. The truth is, abundance requires capacity, and capacity is built in the mind long before it shows up in your life. You can't manage overflow with a limited mentality. You can't walk in overflow while thinking, "I'll never have enough." Because even if God pours it out, you won't recognize it. You'll mislabel favor as coincidence. You'll downplay your wins. You'll talk yourself out of doors that were opened for you, not because you weren't ready externally, but because your mind was still living beneath your calling. You've got to decide that lack is no longer your language. Stop saying, "I can't afford it," and start saying, "How can I create it?" Stop saying, "This always happens to me," and start saying, "This is my opportunity to grow." Stop speaking survival and start declaring overflow. Your words shape your world, and your world mirrors your beliefs. If your words are full of fear and scarcity, your life will reflect that back to you. God doesn't just want to bless you, He wants to stretch you. But stretching can't happen in a mind stuck in fear. You've got to be willing to let go of the familiar to grab hold of the future. That means leaving behind thinking patterns that feel safe but keep you small. That means upgrading your identity to match your assignment. That means doing the work to heal the thoughts that tell you wealth is for them, but not for you. The truth is, prosperity starts in the mind before it ever reaches your wallet. That's why so many lottery winners go broke. That's why people get promotions and still feel like imposters. That's why businesses collapse even with good products, because the mind was never expanded to match the blessing. They received something externally that they couldn't hold internally. If you want a prosperous life, you have to think like someone who's already walking in it, not someday, not when you get the degree or the promotion or the platform. But right now, because the future you're praying for is already possible, but your mindset will determine whether you see it as a threat or a harvest. And until your mind changes, your life can't. Repetition is not just a habit. It is a holy weapon. It is the strategy heaven uses to rewire earthbound minds. Transformation doesn't come from inspiration alone. It comes from installation. And the only way something gets installed into your belief system is through repetition. Your thoughts don't change because you heard something powerful one time. They change because you heard truth so many times that lies could no longer survive in the soil of your soul. This is the missing ingredient for most people. They want a breakthrough, but they want it instantly. They want freedom, but they're allergic to process. They want to change, but they keep changing their focus. What they don't understand is that the mind doesn't change through emotion. It changes through consistency. And repetition is the bridge between who you are now and who you were born to become. The enemy isn't afraid of a powerful moment. He's afraid of a disciplined mind, because a single emotional high can't defeat a lifelong stronghold. You can cry during a sermon and still stay stuck if you never rehearse what you heard. You can shout over a prophecy and still live beneath your potential if you don't do the mental work of building that truth into your system. And that's where repetition comes in. The world you see is a reflection of the thoughts you've practiced. If you don't like what you see, don't just change your goals, change your rehearsals, because repetition is not just about memory, it's about mastery. What you repeat becomes what you remember, and what you remember becomes what you react to. So if all you rehearse is fear, rejection, and scarcity, then every opportunity will feel like a threat. Every relationship will feel risky. Every step forward will feel dangerous. But when you rehearse truth, You begin to live from truth, and that's when transformation becomes inevitable. You don't become confident by accident. You become confident by repeating courage until it becomes your default. You don't become disciplined through motivation. You become disciplined through routine repetition of the right actions, even when your feelings resist them. You don't become free from shame just by praying once. You get free by confronting shame with truth again and again until shame has no place to hide. That's why the Word tells us to meditate on truth day and night. That's not a poetic suggestion. That's a battle plan. Meditation is repetition. Speaking is repetition. Declaring is repetition. When you repeat truth, you give it permission to go deeper than your surface thoughts. You let it touch your subconscious, rewrite your identity, and reroute your behaviors. Think about how habits are formed. They don't come from intensity, they come from consistency. One workout doesn't transform your body. One clean meal doesn't change your health. One day of focus doesn't build a business. Why? Because repetition is the key to transformation. The same is true for your mind. One powerful thought isn't enough. It must be rehearsed, recited, and repeated until it becomes real to you. The same way trauma can shape your life because it gets rehearsed in your mind over and over again. Truth can heal your life when it is repeated with just as much consistency. The difference is what you're choosing to plant. You don't uproot 10 years of negative thinking with one afternoon of positivity. You uproot it with repetition. You speak over yourself when no one else does. You declare the truth when your feelings argue. You meditate on your worth even when your circumstances seem to say otherwise. Most people are rehearsing failure and wondering why they're not seeing fruit. You can't sow fear and expect peace. You can't sow doubt and expect vision. You can't repeat defeat and expect to walk in destiny. You must be intentional about what you rehearse, because repetition is a weapon. It's just a matter of which side you're letting it fight for. You want to change your life. Change what you hear every day. Change what you say every morning. Build a rhythm of truth so strong that lies have no room to survive. Make declarations your discipline. Make affirmations your anchor. Make scripture your soundtrack, not once in a while, not when you feel like it, but daily, relentlessly, repetitively, because that's how strongholds break. That's how habits are built. That's how new identity is formed. The truth is, God has already declared who you are, but it won't feel real until you repeat it, until your mind agrees, until your nervous system stops rejecting it, until your self-concept catches up with your calling. You're not waiting on a miracle. The miracle is waiting on your repetition. Because transformation isn't magic. It's the compound interest of the truth you choose to repeat. You cannot live in truth while still feeding lies. Every lie you entertain has an appetite, and the more you give it your attention, the more it grows. Lies don't die quietly. They must be starved. They must be denied the oxygen of agreement. They must be cut off from the resources of your focus, your words, and your emotions, because the lie that you coddle will become the ceiling that caps your calling, and the truth you ignore will become the future you never experience. The enemy doesn't come with chains, he comes with whispers, because if he can get you to believe something false about yourself, your value, or your future, he doesn't need to destroy you. You'll do it for him. That's how powerful lies are. They don't just distort what you see, they convince you that what's broken is normal, that dysfunction is your identity, that fear is your protector, that playing small is wisdom, that staying silent is strength. But none of that is truth. It's just a well-fed lie that's been rehearsed long enough to feel like reality. Lies are not passive, they are predatory, and they do not need your permission to attack. but they do need your agreement to remain. The lie, "I'll never be enough," only has power because somewhere in your soul you've given it space. The lie, "I'll always be rejected," keeps showing up because you've let it sleep in the guest room of your thoughts. But the moment you stop feeding it, stop speaking it, entertaining it, identifying with it, it begins to weaken. Lies can't thrive in an environment of starvation. At the same time, truth must be fed. Truth doesn't grow by accident. It grows by attention, by meditation, by repetition. The truth you know doesn't transform you. It's the truth you live in, the truth you practice, the truth you choose even when it's inconvenient, that renews your mind and reshapes your life. And if you're not feeding the truth daily, it will never become strong enough to overpower the lies that have built fortresses in your thinking. What does feeding the truth look like? It looks like waking up and declaring your identity before the day tries to define it for you. It looks like rejecting thoughts that don't align with your calling. It looks like standing on what God says about you, even when your feelings scream the opposite. Feeding the truth isn't always glamorous. Sometimes it's boring, sometimes it's quiet, but it's powerful, because every time you speak truth, you're building spiritual muscle. Every time you declare what's right, even when you feel what's wrong, you're training your mind to agree with heaven. And what you agree with, you align with. If you agree with a lie, you start acting like it's true. You shrink, you sabotage, you stay small. But when you agree with truth, even when you don't feel it yet, you start stepping like the person you were created to be. You show up differently, you speak boldly, you pursue what once intimidated you, not because your feelings changed, but because your agreement did. Starving the lie means cutting off its source. Stop repeating it. Stop justifying it. Stop rehearsing it in conversations. Stop hanging around people who validate it. If someone always reinforces your fear, your shame, or your insecurity, they're not your support system. They're part of your sabotage. You can't walk in truth while fellowshipping with deception. Sometimes starving the lie means changing your circle. Sometimes it means guarding your inputs. Sometimes it means catching a thought before it settles and casting it down before it becomes a belief. You have to understand that truth isn't weak. Truth is war, and the moment you start feeding it, you'll notice resistance, because the lie doesn't want to die. It wants to stay. It wants to disguise itself as humility, as realism, as common sense. But don't be fooled. The truth may feel unfamiliar, even uncomfortable at first, but it will liberate you. Lies feel safe because they're predictable. Truth feels risky because it forces growth, but only one of them will produce the life you're called to live. You weren't created to manage lies. You were created to demolish them, to replace them, to live so deeply rooted in truth that lies can't even breathe in your atmosphere. But you must be intentional. You must choose what gets your attention, your energy, your voice. Because every day, your thoughts are either feeding your freedom or feeding your bondage. There is no middle ground. If you want to walk in purpose, you must commit to a lifestyle where truth dominates your mental diet. You don't overcome the lie by trying to reason with it. You overcome it by starving it, and then, with holy aggression, you feed the truth until it's the loudest voice in your life. ChatGPT said, "Thinking is a skill, and like any skill, it must be trained with intention, discipline, and intensity." You don't wake up wise, you don't stumble into clarity, and you don't drift into break through thinking. Every powerful thinker you admire didn't get there by accident. They trained their mind like a warrior trains for war. They studied patterns, questioned assumptions, challenged emotions, and sharpened their thoughts until their mindset became a weapon, not a weakness. The average person doesn't think. They react. They absorb. They adopt thoughts from their environment, culture, and trauma without ever asking, is this true? Is this serving my destiny? They're mentally passive but emotionally reactive, and a reactive mind can never build a proactive life. You can't win battles with untrained thoughts. You can't make wise decisions when your mind is running wild and unfiltered. That's why training your thinking isn't optional. It's essential. A warrior doesn't go into battle hoping they'll figure it out when the pressure comes. They train when it's quiet so they're ready when it's loud. That's how you must treat your mind. You must rehearse the truth when nothing is wrong, so that when something is, your mind doesn't collapse under the pressure. Most people only start paying attention to their thoughts when things fall apart. But by then, it's too late to build strength. You fight with what you've already built. Training your thinking starts with awareness. You cannot change what you don't confront. What do you consistently think about? What thoughts dominate your quiet moments? Are they filled with purpose, hope, discipline, and solutions? Or are they drowning in fear, comparison, worry, and regret? You've got to become a watcher of your own thoughts like a warrior watches the battlefield. If you let just any thought live in your mind, you're inviting chaos to sit on the throne of your decisions. Once you're aware, you must interrogate your thoughts. Not every thought is worthy of your agreement. Just because it sounds familiar doesn't mean it's true. Many of your thoughts were planted in pain and watered in survival. They feel real because you've rehearsed them, not because they reflect your identity. Warriors ask hard questions. They don't accept every idea. They test them. They evaluate the consequences. They seek truth, not comfort. You must treat your mind like a fortress and deny entry to anything that weakens your clarity or threatens your peace. Training your thinking also requires repetition. A warrior doesn't swing a sword once. They swing it again and again until it becomes second nature. The same applies to your thoughts. You don't think truth once. You build it into your system. You don't affirm your identity when you feel like it. You speak it daily until your emotions follow your declarations. You don't wait for peace to arrive. You rehearse it until it becomes your atmosphere. This kind of mental training takes effort. It will feel unnatural at first. Your brain has been conditioned by patterns, pain, and programming. But repetition rewires your patterns. It teaches your mind what's acceptable and what's not. And over time, thinking like a warrior won't just be what you do. It will become who you are. You also have to guard what feeds your mind. A warrior doesn't train in a toxic environment. They train in an atmosphere that strengthens their focus. If your daily input is filled with negativity, gossip, fear, or mediocrity, don't be surprised when your thinking mirrors that environment. You cannot train like a king while living among cowards. You must protect your peace, elevate your conversations, and expose your mind to thoughts that stretch, not shrink, your vision. Thinking like a warrior also means learning to separate emotion from direction. Emotions are indicators, not commanders. They tell you where you are, not where you should go. A trained mind acknowledges emotions but doesn't bow to them. It feels the fear, but still executes the plan. It feels the doubt, but still speaks the truth. That level of discipline only comes through training, and that training requires daily choices, not dramatic moments. Too many people are asking God for next-level blessings with first-level thinking. They're praying for purpose while tolerating thoughts that contradict it. They're hoping for elevation without upgrading the way they process information. But here's the truth. God doesn't just bless movement. He blesses mental alignment. You cannot walk into your calling with thoughts that are loyal to your captivity. You must discipline your mind to match your destiny. Your brain is not broken. It's just untrained. It's not your enemy. It just needs leadership. You are not the victim of your thoughts. You are the commander of them. But you must show up to that role every single day. Thinking is not passive. It is warfare. And in war, The untrained mind becomes the first casualty. So if you want to live in purpose, walk in power, and lead with clarity, start thinking like a warrior. Don't wait for the fight to come. Train for it now. Challenge every thought that doesn't serve your future. Sharpen your focus. Strengthen your standards. Rehearse your truth. Because when your mind is trained, your life becomes unshakable.